appealing for peace, or were you praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Views on the News, the show where we have wise and witty people expressing their opinions about the various items of news which I introduced at the yesterday Global Atheist News show. And tonight's panel consists of Guy Otten. Hello, Guy. Welcome. You're in the Manchester area of England. Thank you for coming. And Tom, the Tominator from near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia. Welcome, Tom. Okay, so the first item of news. More than 50 people. Oh, I should say, first of all, that we're a news review, or we are a roundup show over the news items that have happened in the previous week. So we're not very topical. We're not breaking news. And what's happened since I edited and uploaded and screened this week's Global Atheist News is the Palestinians and the Israelis have started a war.
Yeah.
We're not going to be talking about that, I'm afraid. That's in next week's edition. I'm sorry, but that's the way it works. Okay. So in this week's edition, what we have is an item about a suicide attack in Pakistan in which 50 people, more than 50 people were killed, dozens were injured. And this was when a blast happened, suicide blast, suicide bomber, near a mosque in a southwestern province of Pakistan on Friday, their religious day, as people gathered to celebrate the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, PBOH. PBUH? I don't know what that is.
I think. Peace be upon him.
Yeah. So no group has claimed responsibility, but it was a terrible atrocity. People were injured and being rescued. Bodies were lying on top of one another. The bomb went off. 10 to 12 relatives of one person died. It's really horrible. And meanwhile, in a separate blast at a mosque near Peshawar city, in a different province of Pakistan, 5 more people died. So this is going on in Pakistan. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think we're waiting, aren't we, to find out who might have done this. I mean, is it a dispute between different types of Muslim? I mean, are we talking about IS versus non-IS Muslims, or are we talking about Shia versus Sunni, or is it a political thing? Or we're really struggling. But either way, it's a piece of madness, and we're rather used to this kind of mad thing happening in that country, sadly.
Well, we don't know is the answer, except that we know that mosques were targeted, and on the day on which people gathered to celebrate the birth of Muhammad. So it's likely to have been some sort of initiative by some sect or other.
Yeah, and it may be that some sects, I think the fundamentalist Muslims do not approve of celebrating Muhammad's birthday because they think it's similar to shirk, associating a man with God.
Yes.
That could be the explanation.
Yes,
Yeah,
that would be a sort of idolatry, wouldn't it? Which
it would
few
be. Yeah.
religions approve of. Yeah.
I mean, one thing is clear is that whoever it is, it's an attempt to force people who don't share your view, to adopt your view, whatever it is. And it runs totally counter to everything we believe, namely freedom of belief in religion. Even though we don't approve of religion, we still think people have the right and freedom to believe in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, terrorism isn't about creating casualties. Terrorism is about creating terror.
Well,
Yes.
So they create the casualties in order to terrify the living into just going along with them. That's what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't
that's
let them
true.
scare you. If you let them scare you, they win.
That's the job description of being a terrorist, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just Pakistan, believe it or not. In Zahedan, Iran, plainclothes military forces of the regime fired on Muslims during Friday prayer. Again, they wait till they're in the mosque, then they shoot them. Scores have been injured and some have been killed. And this is because what they were doing was marking the 1-year anniversary of Bloody Friday, when that's the 30th of September 2022, when there was a massacre because it was a reaction against the way that Mahsa Amini had been killed mysteriously in police circumstances under arrest for not wearing her hijab correctly.
Yeah.
So what's happening there now is a year later, the population are protesting and the military, the government, is massacring them. So the protesters were saying, they were crying out in Iranian, "You are our Daesh."
Yes.
They were accusing their own government of being ISIS and getting shot for it.
Yeah. And they also shout things like "down with the dictatorship."
Yes, yes.
It's very interesting that there is a wholesale generation in Iran who realize that this religion is bad news.
Yes,
It's really encouraging for us, but it's very sad for them. The other thing is that we are having in Europe and elsewhere, like the States probably as well, masses of refugees coming from countries that are oppressive.
Yes.
And whatever other reason they may be wanting to flee their own country, the reality is large numbers of them don't want to live under an oppressive regime, and the result is we have migration crises. It seems to me that we need to be very kind to the migrants who arrive, but we need to be tough as well on the causes of such migration. It's not fair on people that they have to just relocate from their homeland in order to live a reasonable life. And I'm not quite sure how we get these countries to behave properly to their own citizens, but it's something that I think we have to try and do.
In the U.S. or
sorry,
in the U.S. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
Let me go ahead first, because I'd agree with what you said there, Guy, except that there's plenty of evidence that the immigrants bring their religion with them.
Well, that's true.
They're not just running away from atrocities, from heinous regimes that we disapprove of. They're trying to bring them here and set them up in a similar sort of hopeless way. Tom.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Actually, in the U.S., our current immigration influx is containing a lot of people from Venezuela. They've been covering it on the news over here. It's actually putting a strain on the public services in New York City because they have laws about how they have to provide housing and such for these people.
Yes.
And if you know what's going on in Venezuela right now, they're not leaving the country; they're leaving the government.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. We've got to bring decent democracy and liberal democracy everywhere. How are we going to do this? It's a big problem, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge problem, isn't it? Because on the one hand, we don't want to be imperialist. We don't want to be, forcing people to adopt our system. But on the other hand, the West is suffering because we can't handle all the volume of immigrants. And that's coming as a result of poor economic and, political conditions in all of these other countries. Or certain other countries anyway. And because a lot of it is war. We've got Syria and we've got Afghanistan and all these places, Libya. All of these places are complete and elsewhere,
Yeah.
But there's also a huge difference to the way the Ukrainian refugees are treated in the UK. They're given immediate stay. They don't have to prove anything. They're given housing. It's not immediate, but they do get housing. They get benefits. They are allowed to work straight away. They're welcomed, and that people sponsor them and help them. But if you're coming from somewhere where you have brown skin, it's not the same story. You have to fight every inch of the way.
I'm not necessarily sure it's about skin color. It might just be about the sort of culture that you're coming from. If you're coming from an Islamic culture, you're regarded with much more suspicion than you would be if you're coming from a Christian culture. Because at the moment, the Islamic religion looks really like the bogeyman compared to if you could go back 500 years, probably the Christian religion would look like the devil, the really bad influence.
You got to remember that prejudice is about identifiability. I have to be able to identify the person I'm going to be prejudiced against. So if I'm going to be prejudiced against people from Ireland who have a distinctive accent, that's feasible. If I'm going to be prejudiced against people from Africa because they have darker skin, that's feasible. But I have to be able to identify what I'm prejudiced against. So on the street in downtown London, who's easier to spot? Somebody with brown skin or somebody from one of the former Russian bloc countries?
Well, that's true. But I mean, the Albanians, there's quite a lot of Albanian refugees in the UK, and they're being sent back. They're treated as if they're, not really valid refugees, many of them. Some of them being trafficked. So they kind of fall into the other category, even though they appear to be sort of European. And they are European,
Well, and that's where you get into systematic racism, systematic prejudice, as opposed to populist.
There's a difference, and it's hard to delineate between actual victims of oppression and mere economic migrants who are hoping to find a golden pavement for their futures. So, Turkey. It's going on in Turkey too. 2 attackers arrived in a car, and one blew himself up in front of the ministry building in Ankara. And the group called the Kurdistan's Workers' Party has admitted carrying out this attack. They're considered to be a terror group in Turkey, the EU, UK, and US. and they sent their Immortals battalion to commit this atrocity, and they said they targeted the ministry because it was just opening for a season and it's close to the parliament. And so one of them arrived, they got out of their car, one threw a small explosive at the ministry building, and the second attacker, while this was going on, distracting the security, the second attacker opened fire at the guards by the gate before setting off the bomb strapped to himself, which resulted in his death. The first person, meanwhile, ran into the compound and was immediately shot dead by police. 2 police officers were injured. One was shot in the chest, and the other suffered injuries to both legs and an eye. So it's not just in these non-European countries, because this Turkey is actually, that part of Turkey is in Asia. It's across the Bosphorus. But Turkey is a would-be EU member, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Turkey is rather similar, I think, to the problem with Palestine. And that is that the Kurds have never really been given their homeland. They should have been given, by the Versailles Treaty, in my opinion, a homeland of their own. They weren't. They were stuck in what was then the Ottoman Empire still. And the Turks have regarded them as their sort of colonial subjects ever since. And from the Kurdish point of view, it's a freedom struggle, just as from the Palestinian point of view, it's a freedom struggle against Israeli oppression. So I have some sympathy with them. The problem is that their tactics seem to be counterproductive. Because these kind of terrorist activities just reinforce the opposition, reinforce the control.
Yes. Yes.
Both in Israel and Turkey, and we're not getting anywhere really, as far as I can see.
Yeah.
I think I figured out what's going on, though. Apparently, we've just entered that other Muslim holiday season, kaboom.
I'm not sure if that's a season. I think that's an all-round holiday event, or not holiday.
It ramps up right before Ramadan.
Well,
oh dear.
That's what you call black humor, I think.
Well, I visited a mosque. Well, I visited 4 mosques the other weekend, because in the UK the Muslims had an open mosque day. It's be nice to the locals. So I went along, and they were all very nice to me, and they were all very much of, Islam, it's very peaceful, we all love each other and look after the community. And of course, the local mosques where I live, they're very good with, dishing out help to homeless people and people who need food. And, I've got to hand it to them. They do a lot of good. The trouble is that they've got a religion that, if they take it seriously, is not so good.
Yeah. The fear is that this doing of good is an investment to a future attempt to overtake our own government with Sharia law. Yeah. And on that subject, we have there's been a court case concerning a Coventry student who constructed a drone which was capable of delivering a bomb. So
chemical weapon drone.
Yeah, he made this in the bedroom of his home, the home that he shared with his parents in Coventry. And he had a 3D printer capable of making parts for this weapon. And fortunately, he was discovered. He's a mechanical engineering graduate. But a raid happened, and the weapon was discovered in his bedroom. They say it could have delivered a chemical weapon or some other explosive device. And he was found to be in possession of an IS application form. He denied having filled it in, but at Birmingham Crown Court, prosecutors told the court that the drone he'd manufactured, and there's pictures of it, it's quite a big thing in his bedroom, was inspired by the design of the Tomahawk missile. And yeah, if you admire engineering, it's quite an achievement. But the material on his computer included references to fuses, detonators, and an explosive head. Now, luckily, he's been captured. But that's what's going on here in the Midlands. It's not just Iran and Afghanistan and Israel. It's here.
I hope somebody in your government is smart enough to steal all his work.
I mean, the trouble is that this time he's been caught. But if this sort of thing is going on another time, they'll get away with it. I mean, it's very interesting that the Israelis did not know what was going to hit them the other day. I mean, that is incredible because, everyone believes that the Israelis are really far advanced on this, intelligence front, but they failed. There's no way that our intelligence system can surveil every possible terrorist cell that's out there. It's impossible. We just don't know who they are half the time.
We'd need to have CCTV in every weird person's bedroom to see what they're building.
Yeah, but then they build it in the shed, if there is one, or in the basement or something, or in the attic.
What did they call the TVs in 1984 again? And the word escapes me.
Yep. I mean, it is extraordinary, the world we're living in.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And while we're talking about that, in the middle of the country, in the middle of the UK, the Islamic Centre in Leicester, which is also in the West Midlands, was referred by the National Secular Society to the Charity Commission because they are registered as a charity, and there are certain rules that charities must abide by. But they were referred because they have been, recordings have been seen of their sermons, the Islamic Centre sermons, which suggested that blasphemers should be executed, and Jews have a greed of long life because they fear punishment in the afterlife. And these sermons were delivered by Mufti Muhammad Shakir Patel Misbahi, and they're on his YouTube account. They've probably been taken down since, but back in June they were visible. And he is the head teacher of the madrasa, the centre's religious school for children aged from 4 to 13. And they're, according to the Charitable Commission's register, their purpose is the advancement of religion, to promote the spiritual teachings of the Islamic religion. Now, so they've been reported to the Charity Commission for not complying with the necessary rules to be a charity. And guess what the Charity Commission said? They said they've decided on this occasion the best way forward is to engage with the charity, to put the concerns raised to the trustees, and to provide them with regulatory advice and guidance as needed.
I mean, that's kid gloves, isn't it, really? I mean, the Charity Commission did deregister. Was it a closed Plymouth Brethren church? Do you remember some years ago? On the grounds that it wasn't open to the public and therefore wasn't available. There was no public benefit going on. But it seems to me that the supervision of charities, so-called charities that are religious, it does need to actually toughen up a bit, because this isn't the first time we've had imams regularly say that homosexuals should be stoned, thrown off buildings. And people should be killed if they're apostates and all this kind of thing.
Exactly.
It's just, and I don't want my tax dollars or pounds. I don't actually want them paid to any religion at all anyway, but certainly not one that's being so violent and antisocial as to promote that kind of belief system.
You're absolutely right. In fact, this very centre, the Islamic Centre in Leicester, was previously reported to the Charity Commission back in 2019, because on its website it said those who leave Islam should be punished with death. So there you go, the apostate thing. Yeah.
This is very interesting to me. Over in the UK, you guys have what I would consider a much better system for determining if an organization should be considered charitable and tax exempt as a result than we do in the States. The primary example of that for me is Scientology. They got it in the States, they didn't in the UK. And now ours has been significantly weakened almost to a point of non-existence. Because they're not supposed to be allowed to comment on politics at all in any way. You comment on politics, now you're not a charitable organization in the States.
Yeah.
But the IRS isn't enforcing that in any way, shape, or form. And so then over in the UK, it sounds like you guys are weakening on the enforcement against religious organizations as well. I find that both interesting and dangerous.
Well, I don't actually. I actually think there has never been much enforcement, and really, what the NSS are doing and other people are doing is trying to get them to beef up their enforcement. It's only in the last 20 or 30 years we've had Muslims in any significant numbers. The problem was not really noticed before then, and I think this is a bit of a campaign that atheists and humanists and skeptics and liberals really need to have in the UK to enhance this supervision and sort of regulation. Interestingly enough, though, in the UK, charities can engage in a certain amount of political lobbying and campaigning. So that's interesting as well. There has been a bit of we're not like the States in that sense.
I'm concerned. I must admit, I am concerned that we're being too tolerant, that we are letting people abuse our regulations simply by not enforcing them enough.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Watch this space. Is it going to happen again? Although, interestingly enough, there is a new breed of imam in the UK. Ones who've been born here, who speak English well, and have been to local seminaries or whatever they call their clergy training places. There's one in Bury, quite close to where I live, they are much more attuned to what is acceptable to the British ear. And I've debated with one of these, and I get the impression that maybe they're the sort of people who want to actually sort of draw a screen over some of the more unacceptable and immoral, precepts contained in raw Islam.
Well, I hope they attain ascendancy in that case.
Yeah.
Okay, so Moving on to some lighter items.
Mm.
Well, I don't know how light you regard these as, but millions of Mormon crickets have invaded the town of Elko, Nevada.
Hold on a second. How do they know they're Mormon? Did they like check and see if they have multiple wives? I mean, what was the study that went into this? Are they holding little Joseph Smith banners? You know, just because they're in Utah.
No, it's because they wear magic underpants.
They're in Nevada. They're in Nevada, not Utah. They're in Nevada.
Oh, sorry.
You're absolutely right. They don't have banners on them about Mormonism. No, they're called Mormons, apparently. Mormon crickets, apparently. And they're not even crickets either. Biological taxonomy puts them in Catidid family. But apparently, back in the 1800s...
So they're insects. They're a type of insect. Is that right?
Yeah,
right, okay. And they're called Mormon insects. Well, that's funny to start with. So that's good.
Because historically, they ate all the crops of the Mormon settlers.
Oh well, they're anti-Mormon crickets. They're discriminating. You know,
yeah.
I think we should call them Native American crickets.
Yeah. Anyway, the trouble is they have migratory phases where suddenly a large part. It's a bit like the locusts, plagues of locusts, but these are slightly different insects. Going back to something which is not really quite so funny, at least 10 people, including 3 children, were killed when the roof of a church collapsed in northern Mexico. What's relevant about this from Global Atheist News point of view is one of the survivors said, "Thank God I'm alive. I feared I would not see my beautiful family again. I don't know how we got out." So she's not blaming God for the roof collapsing and killing all those. 60 people were injured, 10 dead, including children. But she's thanking God that she has survived. And the bishop of the diocese where this church was, said he was praying for the victims. So
very helpful. Yeah, I mean that's just typically we get that after every earthquake, like after the Holocaust. 6 million Jews have gone, but I'm okay, and thank God for that. It's just illogical. Yeah,
self-centeredness, isn't it? It's human egocentrism.
Yeah.
So finally, before we run out of time, because I like to schedule these meetings for about 40 minutes, you'll like this.
Yeah.
A Brazilian grandmother has been praying to her personal idol, representation of what she thought was Saint Anthony. It turns out the figurine was of Elrond, Lord of Rivendell, from Lord of the Rings. She didn't know. She's been praying for that effigy for several years.
Elrond is not the worst choice. I'm just going to pray to a fictional character. Elrond is not the worst choice. Not even from that series of books.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And what's the difference between one little effigy and another, eh? What is it?
They're both human inventions, so prayer is of no effect except at the psychological level of to the person doing it. So
that's right. Yeah.
I mean, it's like when I'm in the psychiatric unit and a patient forgetting that I'm non-religious, because I'm a humanist chaplain, and they say, "Oh, can I have a?" That was a paper plane just passing over you, one of your children. But a psychiatric patient will ask me, "Father, will you give me a blessing?" Forgetting I'm non-religious, so I give them a non-religious well-wishing.
Yes.
But the magic works. They like it. It settles them.
Yeah.
So you don't need to believe in God.
No,
to do it.
mental satisfaction is good enough from whatever source. Yeah. So before I get completely discombobulated by paper planes, thank you very much for taking part in this show, and thank you anybody who watches it too. Say goodbye.
Bye. Cheers.
Hope to see you next time. Bye.
Russ, was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Harry Moon drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys?